Hey guys, welcome to Sleep with History, where the past whispers softly as you drift into dreams. Tonight, we're not just talking about a sport. We're stepping onto a stone court where the crowd holds its breath and the ball is far heavier than it should be. This isn't the story of a game you'd want to play. Not even once. Not the kind of ball game you see on sunny fields with cheers and sweaty hugs, but the kind where the court is carved into the earth, where the walls are lined with carvings of gods, serpents, and skulls, where silence isn't awkward, it's expected, reverent, where the loser doesn't just go home, but somewhere far beyond. You might think ancient Maya civilization was all about pyramids, calendars, and temples reaching for the stars. But tonight, you'll hear a quieter, darker part of that story, the part that history textbooks skim over, the part where rubber balls were soaked in ritual and blood was part of the score. And trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll never look at the word game the same way again. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Leave a comment. I read them like bedtime postcards from around the world. And if you enjoy these soft, strange stories from the past, consider subscribing. It means more than you think, especially to a little night owl like me. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a little fan for that soft, steady hum in the background. Let your arms grow heavy. Let your breath slow down. Sink into the quiet. Tonight's tale isn't in a hurry. You're not just tired, you're curious. And that's a dangerous thing to be in a Maya ball court. Because curiosity is what gets you close to the edge. Close enough to see the carvings. Close enough to smell the incense. Close enough to notice the stain on the altar stone isn't just from rain. Let's begin. Day Section 1. The ball court awaits. You're walking slowly now. Your bare feet press into cracked stone still warm from the day's sun. Around you, the jungle whispers, not in words, but in rustles and sighs. Something ancient lingers here. You can feel it in the back of your throat like dust or memory. You step through the broken arch. There it is, the court. Long and narrow, its walls lean inward like the sides of a canyon. Vines have claimed the edges, curling into every crack. A hoopstone weathered impossibly high still clings to the wall even after all these centuries. A ring through which a ball once passed, or failed to. It's silent here, but not empty. Your eyes trace the ground smooth, in some parts jagged in others. You imagine how it looked back then, swept clean before every match incense curling from stone pots, the faint beat of a drum just beyond the trees. And above all, tension, the kind that buzzes in your skin, the kind that doesn't break until something or someone does. You sit on one of the crumbling ledges, run your fingers along the edge. The air smells like old limestone and wet moss, but there's something else. Something faint, metallic. You tell yourself it's just your imagination. But it smells like blood, dried ancient, and sunk deep into the stones. The Maya called this place the Tlachtli, or in their own tongue, Paktapak. It wasn't just a court, it was a stage. And every performance here had stakes far beyond winning or losing. This wasn't a game. This was cosmic theater. Some say the court was a mirror of the underworld, Sibalba, a place where gods played and died and were reborn. Others say it was a meeting ground between worlds where mortal bodies could sway the favor of the heavens. But tonight, you're not here for theories. You're here to listen, to feel, to remember. You lean back against cool stone, close your eyes, and suddenly, it begins. The noise. Faint at first, then building. The thud of rubber striking stone. A hush falling over the crowd. The soft chant of priests. The flutter of painted feathers in the wind. You're no longer alone. You're sitting among hundreds packed shoulder to shoulder. A woman next to you grips a clay idol, lips moving in silent prayer. A man behind you mutters bets, not for who will win, but for who will be chosen. The players enter. They move like dancers wrapped in thick belts, padded collars, carved headdresses. They are warriors, but they do not carry weapons. Only hips, elbows, knees. No hands, no feet, only rhythm, only sacrifice. You watch as the ball is brought out. It's not a ball like you know. It's dense, heavy, made of rubber tapped from sacred trees, thickened with herbs. Sometimes people whisper filled with ashes, or something worse. The priest raises his hand. The game begins. They strike the ball with their hips. It flies through the air, bounces hard, against stone rebounds into movement again. It's beautiful, brutal. You can see pain in their movements, but also something else: devotion. Not to the crowd, not even to the gods, but to the moment, to the act. A player falls. The ball rolls past him. He doesn't rise right away. You hear a gasp ripple through the crowd. He gets up, slowly. But the fear is there now, not just in him, in everyone. Because here falling could mean losing. And losing could mean the end. There's a whisper traveling through the rows. You catch it on the wind. Today, it's the victor, someone says. No, today it's the loser, replies another. You don't know which is worse, because both are true depending on the place, the king, the season. Some courts offered up the winner as a perfect gift to the gods. Others demanded the loser to rid the world of impurity. But no one leaves this court untouched. Not the players, not the crowd, not even you. The ball sails high now. It arcs toward the ring. Everyone leans forward. It misses. The sound that follows isn't disappointment. It's relief. Temporary, but real. The game continues. But you're no longer watching. Not really. You're drifting. Back into the stones beneath you. Back into the earth. Where bones sleep beneath the court. Where voices still murmur in Nahuatl and Yucatec. Where time doesn't pass. It waits. You open your eyes. The court is empty again. Just you, the moss, and that faint metallic smell in the air. But something is different. You hear one last sound, soft, almost forgotten, like a stone ball rolling just out of sight. Section 2. What the ball was made of you. Sit on the edge of the old court knees, drawn close, and gaze at the center where the game always began. The ring still clings to the wall like a question no one has dared to answer. And you wonder quietly what it felt like when that heavy ball struck your ribs, or your jaw, or your spirit. Because this wasn't a soft bouncing ball filled with air and fun. This was something else, something that hurt. The Maya called it the rubber heart. Pulpy resin tapped from sacred trees deep in the jungle was shaped, smoked, hardened. The process was alchemical, part chemistry, part devotion. The ball had to bounce just enough to live, but not enough to fly. It had to obey gravity, but not too quickly. It had to strike like truth, silent, dense, unavoidable. But that's not all. Some say the ball was filled with ashes from the dead, the powdered remains of ancestors or sacrificed warriors, a reminder of where power comes from and where it returns. Others whispered that inside the most sacred balls there were teeth. Not dozens, just one or two, hidden within, embedded like seeds inside a fruit, the teeth of kings, the teeth of enemies, the teeth of players who'd once stood here and were no longer standing. Imagine being a boy handed a ball like that. Imagine being told to kneel and accept it. Imagine feeling it roll against your shin and really knowing that it had memory. The ball wasn't only heavy, it was hot. When first shaped and pulled from the smokehouse, it still retained warmth. The players would pass it from hand to hand, in secret, not for the bounce, but to feel the pulse, as if it lived. Some swore they could hear it hum. Now picture trying to hit it, with your hip, your thigh, your elbow. Never your hand. That would offend the gods. You move wrong and the ball doesn't bounce, it slams, into bone, into chest, into pride, and sometimes it stays still as if daring you to approach it again. It left bruises shaped like moons. Sometimes it broke ribs. Sometimes it knocked the air right out of lungs or the spirit out of a man. That's why they trained from childhood, not just for strength, but for pain. Boys began with smaller balls, not made from full rubber but hardened leaves, bark, and mud. They would pass them in hidden corners of the village, mimicking older brothers, hitting them with sticks first, then hips, then elbows. And when they cried, the elders didn't hush them. They just nodded. Because if you couldn't endure the ball, you couldn't endure the gods. In some villages, the ball had a name. Not just the ball, but something more poetic. You're it that returns, the heavy thing, the one that remembers. It was passed between generations like an heirloom. If a team lost badly, they burned the ball. Not from anger, from shame. No one wanted to keep the memory of a failure alive. But if the match was glorious, even if their team lost, the ball might be placed on an altar for a night, rubbed with oils, whispered to, yes, whispered to, because it had seen something few ever would. A good ball didn't just bounce, it guided. You might not know why it curved to the left or shot too fast, but the priest believed it was fate, that the gods moved it as they willed, that the ball was their finger on earth. And when the ball passed through the stone ring high above the world, held its breath. Because something would change. Sometimes it meant a new season. Sometimes it meant someone would die. But always it meant the gods were listening. You rise now, stepping toward the middle of the court. You imagine reaching down, picking up that heavy sphere. You feel its weight in your hands, though nothing's there. And you wonder, if you dropped it now, would it roll? Or would it stop suddenly, as if it remembered you? Section 3. Rules. No one survived. You are sitting in the grass now, near the far edge of the court, where sunlight doesn't quite reach. The stone walls curve like the sides of a forgotten canyon, and here in the hush of this half-light, you start to wonder, how did the game work? What were the rules? Then you realize that's the wrong question, because there were no rules in the way you think of them, not like soccer or basketball with referees and fouls and timers. The Maya ball game didn't need a rule book. It needed a rhythm and a sacrifice. Still, there were patterns, sacred ones, woven into the movements repeated through generations, as if the players were echoing something older than language. The ball could only be struck with the hips, knees, elbows or forearms, never the hands, never the feet. That much is clear. But how do you control a solid rubber ball the size of a human head, using only your body's edges? That's where the pain came in. Players wore thick belts, sometimes leather, sometimes stone-backed. Some wore chest guards. Others, those with less, simply endured. Every movement was a calculation. Twist too early, and the ball glances away. Move too late, and your ribs remember it for days. The goal. Sometimes it was to keep the ball in play. Sometimes to pass it through the stone hoop 6 meters above the court. But here's the twist that didn't always end the game. In some courts, it triggered a pause. In others, it signaled the final score. In still others, it wasn't about the ball at all. It was about who would die afterward. That's the part no one tells you. The score didn't matter, not really. It was the performance, the pageantry, the way the players moved, bled, endured. That's what the gods watched. And sometimes the winner died. Yes, the winner. Imagine that. Training your entire life, mastering the angles of your hips, and the pain of falling praying before every game. And then, when you finally prove your worth, when you do what few ever could, you're chosen. Not for glory, not for treasure. For death. Not as punishment, as praise. Some believed it was the highest honor to die after victory, to offer your life at the moment your skill was undeniable. Your blood fresh from triumph was seen as the purest offering. Others say it was the loser, that the worst player, the one who failed, was given as a reminder that weakness had no place in balance. But the truth, it changed from place to place, from ruler to ruler, from priest to priest. That's why the players never really knew. Each time they entered the court, they didn't just face their opponents. They faced fate and the crowd they watched in silence. No cheering, no shouting, Just breaths, held eyes, white hands, clutching charms, or feathers, or folded bits of cloth with names inside. You'd think fear would make them avoid these games, but they came in droves. Because watching someone dance with death was holy. Even now in the ruins you can sense it. The stillness isn't peaceful, it's sacred. The stones don't echo because they're empty. They echo because they're listening. You look up at the hoop again. Try to imagine the ball arcing through it. Try to imagine the moment after. Did the players look up to the gods? Or down at the blade? The priests never told them which it would be. They only said, "Play well." So they did, and they still do. Here in your memory, in this silence, in this slow unwinding of time, you run your hand along the court's edge, rough with age, warm from sun, and for just a second you think you feel it, the pulse of a ruleless rhythm. Still beating, still waiting. Section 4. The ceremony. Before the game. Before the first ball was ever touched, the game had already begun. Not with movement, not with muscle, but with breath, smoke, and silence. Because for the Maya playing wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. A performance meant not just for the crowd, but for the gods watching from above and below. You wake early. The air is thick with the smell of copal, the sacred resin burning in clay bowls near the altar. It smells sweet, but also sharp, like a memory that stings your throat. Priests in feathered robes walk slowly between the players, anointing their foreheads with a dark paste made of charcoal and ash. Your turn comes. The priest does not speak, only dips his finger into a gourd of black ink and paints 2 lines beneath your eyes. One for the living, one for the dead. He moves to your chest next, where he draws the open jaws of a jaguar, not with paint, but with a stone blade. Just a scratch, just enough to bleed. Because without blood, the court is only stone. You're not alone. The others kneel beside you. No one speaks. Their heads bowed, their shoulders bare. On each arm, bands of leather. Around each waist, heavy belts laced with bone. A few players tremble. One is weeping quietly, not from fear, but from devotion. In the distance, the drums begin. Low, slow, like thunder far away, or the beat of a heart slowing down. A second priest enters carrying the ball. It rests on a cloth, dyed with crushed cochineal, a bright, unnerving red. He walks with the weight of ritual, lifting the ball as if it were an infant, or a skull. The sun touches it, briefly revealing smudges dense, and something darker, still fingerprints perhaps, or something older. You rise together. The priest begins the chant, not in words you know, but in syllables that vibrate in your ribs. The gods are being named, invoked, summoned. Some names are soft, like wind, others sharp, like broken obsidian. Each name a door, each breath a key. Behind you, a mother presses a kiss to her son's back. A lover places a flower into the folds of a shoulder wrap. An old man kneels at the edge of the court, whispering to the stone, his hand pressed flat against it. He remembers something the rest of you don't. This court has seen hundreds of games, and more deaths than days. The players now step forward in a line. Before them, 3 stone bowls, each filled with something different. The first water from a sacred cave, cold and silent. Each player drinks eyes closed. The second ash from burnt offerings, which they rub across their arms and legs. The third blood from a sacrificed bird, still warm, dabbed onto the tongue, then the heart. It is not symbolic. It is binding. Only now may the game begin. But not yet. One more act. Each player picks up a stone, not large, not sharp, and places it in the center of the court, one by one without speaking. It's a way of giving the gods their name before they are asked for favor. A reminder, here I am. I will not hide. When the last stone is set, the court is quiet again. Not the silence of absence, but of attention. The gods are listening, and so are the dead. Somewhere beyond the trees, the sky shifts. The clouds part. Light spills like honey across the walls. The crowd begins to gather, but no one speaks. They know this moment is not theirs. It belongs to the players, to the blood, to the old rules older than memory. You look at the ball again. It doesn't bounce. It waits. Just like the gods. Just like the blade. Just like you. Section 5. Copan's Bloody Court. You leave the overgrown court behind, stepping deeper into memory, deeper into stone, and the jungle thins around you until you arrive in Copan. It is early morning. The sky is bruised pink, and mist clings low over the trees. You can smell earth and something else, limestone and wetness, the breath of ancient stone. Here the ball court is not forgotten. It stands tall, fierce, deliberate. 2 parallel walls flank the arena, steep and smooth their surfaces, carved with glyphs. Faces stare down, not human, not God, but something between. One panel shows a jaguar tearing into the stars. Another, a ball player, mid-kick, his ribcage exposed, heart flying from the wound like a bird. These aren't just decorations. They're instructions, warnings, invitations. This court at Copan was one of the bloodiest. Not just because of the sacrifices, though, there were many, but because of what the rulers believed. King 18 Rabbit, the poet king, once said that blood was the perfume of the gods. And Copan was drenched in it. Imagine standing there centuries ago, the sun just rising. The ball already slick from dew and yesterday's sweat. A priest's hand gripping your shoulder, leaning close to whisper, "Today the gods are watching you." Not you as a person, you as a symbol, you as a tool for renewal. They say one tournament here lasted for 5 days. 5 days of sun breath, dust and agony. 2 teams of noble-born players trained from youth, chosen for their grace and strength. But only one player would be sacrificed. No one knew who it would be. The crowd came anyway, not to cheer, to witness. You can still see the platform where the sacrifices took place. It's low flat, made of sandstone darkened over time. If you touch it, your fingers come away gritty. But beneath that grit is memory. One inscription nearby shows a man kneeling, head bowed, hands tied loosely in front of him. He is calm, eyes closed, as if sleeping. Behind him, a priest raises a stone blade, jagged, ceremonial, not sharp like a knife, but serrated like a question. Was this the victor or the vanquished? It doesn't say, and that's the point. Because the game wasn't about winning, it was about balance. Copan's kings believed that to keep the universe from unraveling, blood had to be spilled in rhythm. Just like the ball strike, rebound, fall, repeat. The more perfect the movement, the more meaningful the offering. That's why they built the court with such precision. The acoustics here are haunting. If you stand at one end and whisper your words, travel soft and eerie to the other side. Even now, centuries later, your breath echoes. And for a moment, you wonder if the stones are whispering back. Maybe they're remembering too. Remembering the days when children stood on tiptoe to glimpse the action, when women clutched charms against their chests, when old men watched with quiet reverence, not for the players, but for the story unfolding. Because each game was a story, with characters, with tension, with sacrifice. No one left unchanged, not the players, not the priests, not even the crowd. Here, in Copan, the line between sport and ceremony blurred completely. The court was an altar, the players were the ritual, and the gods, unseen but felt, were the audience. You walk slowly to the edge of the court now. The grass is soft, but the stone beneath it is hard and endless. Your fingers trace the edge of a carved panel. You don't know what it says, but it feels like a name. Maybe someone who stood here before, someone who played, someone who bled. You close your eyes and picture him, the way he stood, the way he breathed just before the game began. Did he know what was coming, or did he believe, like all the others, that this was honor? Maybe both. Maybe that's what made it so beautiful, and so terrifying. You open your eyes again, and for just a second the sun hits the platform just right. It glows faintly, like the memory of fire, like a ceremony waiting to happen, like a game that never truly ended. Section 6. Whispers from Chichen Itza. The jungle shifts around you. Leaves whisper like old tongues, and vines part without sound. You walk slow and unsure until the trees open into light, and there it is, the great ball court of Chichen Itza. It takes your breath without asking. Longer than a modern football field, walls soaring silent. A ring still clings impossibly high on each side, worn by wind but never broken. You tilt your head back to see it. You squint. You wonder how any human body guided only by hips and knees ever sent a ball through that ring. And then, lower down, you see something else. Carvings. Dozens of them. Row after row of men in motion. Arms raised, knees bent, heads bowed. One panel shows a line of players, 7, maybe 8, dressed in intricate gear. Their bodies are alive with motion caught mid-game, but at the end of the line, one man kneels. His head is gone. In its place, a spray of curling vines, or maybe snakes, or maybe blood. 7 streams arc upward, each one blooming into flowers, birds, or glyphs. It is violent, it is beautiful, it is confusing. You step closer. And then closer again. The stone feels cool beneath your fingers, even under the heat of the sun. You trace the vines. The artist carved them with such care, as if each drop of blood knew exactly where it was going. You realize what you're seeing. This is not just a game. This is transformation. A head is taken, but from it grows life. From death, divine things bloom. The Maya didn't just believe in sacrifice. They believed in what it created, that blood spilled in rhythm could feed the rain, coax the crops, open the stars. And here in Chichen Itza, they built a stage big enough for the gods to see clearly. The acoustics are strange. You stand at one end, and when you speak, your voice bounces in a dozen directions as if answered. Some say it's designed that way so that the gods could hear the name of the sacrificed echo across the court again and again. Others say it's for the crowd, that their silence would be returned to them tenfold until the tension built like a drum. But there's a third theory, that the walls themselves remember. That every whisper, every name, every cry of victory or mercy they stayed here, soaked into stone, layered into shadow. You listen now. Not with your ears, but with your body. You can almost feel it, a presence, a murmur, just beneath the hum of the insects and the rustle of distant trees. Some say that on certain days, days when the sun hits just right or when no one else is there, the court speaks, not in words but in feelings, a tightness in the chest, a weight behind the eyes, a warmth at the base of the skull. You don't know what it means. You don't have to. Just know this people came from far beyond the Maya heartlands to witness these games. Pilgrims, traders, nobles, even rivals. They gathered not just to watch a match, but to see a world balanced through ritual. They believed the outcome of the game could decide the fate of cities, the favor of rain, the mood of gods. And here that belief bled into stone. You look up at the ring again. It hasn't moved. It's just as high, just as impossible. But someone did it, at least once. And the story of that shot, that one perfect terrifying moment, still hangs in the air, invisible, but waiting. Maybe that's the whisper you hear. Not from the past, from the ring itself. Calling out for one more game. Section 7, who was chosen to play. You sit now beneath a crumbling arch, where vines wrap like slow hands around the stone. It's quieter here, not just from distance but from age. The court is older, forgotten by most, but that makes it feel more alive. You begin to wonder who played these games, who stood on this stone knowing the gods were watching. You might imagine warriors, broad shoulders, stone-faced nobility, but that's only part of it. Because some of the players didn't choose the game. They were chosen by it. From the moment they were born, some children were marked not by prophecy or magic, but by lineage, by the way their hands moved, by dreams their mothers had before they were even conceived. A flicker of smoke, a serpent coiled in blood, a star trembling in water. And so the priest came, not to ask, but to announce. "This one," they would say, lifting the baby gently, "this one will play." The family would bow, not with joy, not with sorrow, something between, because being chosen meant honor, but also danger, because those who played well might never leave the court, and those who failed might wish they hadn't. From childhood, they were trained, not just in the movements, but in the mind. They were taught to fall without fear, to strike, without hesitation, to feel pain as part of prayer. Their diets were monitored, their dreams recorded. Every morning they bathed in cold water and whispered the names of gods before speaking to anyone else. They lived in shadow, sacred but distant. Some grew into the role, others fought it quietly. But the day came when each was brought to the court, not as a child, not as a man, but as a vessel, clothed in belts and feathers, their bodies painted with symbols that weren't explained. A jaguar claw on the thigh, a spiral over the heart, lines across the forehead meant to confuse the underworld spirits so they couldn't steal the soul too soon. Even the ball recognized them, or so the elders said. "It bounces differently when they touch it," whispered an old woman once, her hands trembling over a pot of maize, "like it remembers the last blood." Not all players were marked from birth. Some rose through other paths. A village champion, a warrior who survived 100 battles, a slave whose skill couldn't be denied. They came from different places, but they shared one thing: silence, a stillness in their eyes, the kind of stillness only those who've seen the knife waiting at the end of the match can carry. In the big cities, games became political. Kings chose players not only for skill, but for symbolism. A team might represent a rising clan, or an old rival. Sometimes the game wasn't just a ritual, it was a message, played in blood, read in silence, and still the crowd gathered. They didn't know each player's story, but they could tell which ones were ready to die. It showed in the way they stepped onto the court, how they touched the ball with reverence, how they met the priest's eyes without flinching. Not all were brave. Some faked it. Some prayed the gods wouldn't notice them. But the gods always knew. You shift on the stone now, brushing away a dry leaf. Beneath it, a carving half hidden, a foot carved in relief. Not large, young, but poised mid-motion. You wonder whose it was, what they thought as they stood here, whether they heard their name echo from the crowd or only from within, and then a sound. Soft, fleeting, like the scuff of a foot on dry dust. But when you turn, no one's there, just the court. And the memory of those who were chosen. Section 8. The crowd that watched silently. You walk the edge of the court, now feet brushing low weeds, fingers tracing the smooth dips in the ancient stone benches. This is where they sat, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. You can almost see their outlines burned into the light shadows of men and women wrapped in woven cloth feathers, in their hair charms clenched in trembling fists. But they didn't cheer. That's the first thing that strikes you. No noise, no shouts, no roars of joy or cries of outrage, just silence. Not the awkward kind, not the bored kind, but the kind that feels sacred, like being inside a temple, like watching lightning in the distance and knowing it's not meant for you, but you'll remember it forever. The Maya called these games sacred performances. The players weren't just athletes, they were vessels, mirrors, sacrifices in waiting. And the crowd, they weren't just watching, they were witnessing. Each spectator came with their own reason. Some came for prayer. They needed rain, or healing, or a sign that the gods still listened. They brought offerings: dried maize, jaguar teeth, feathers, dyed with crushed insects. These they placed at the edge of the court in silence, before finding their seats. Others came with fear. They knew someone playing, a cousin, a friend, a child. They wrapped their faces with shawls not for the sun, but to hide the trembling. Some watched through the gaps in their fingers. Some never looked at all, only listened. Then there were the ones who came because they had to. They were nobles, officials, messengers from distant cities. Their presence was required, but their hearts weren't always in it. They sat still, back straight expressions, like carved masks. You couldn't tell if they wanted blood or mercy. But the priests, they watched the watchers. Because how the crowd responded mattered. One wrong sound, one misplaced gasp, one word spoken at the wrong moment, and it could shift the outcome. Offend the gods, change who would die. So silence was survival. Mothers brought babies and kept them quiet with strips of cloth soaked in herbal tea. Children sat, wide-eyed, legs swinging over the ledges, too afraid to speak. Lovers held hands tightly, not from romance, but to keep from trembling. Stillness spread like fire. Some of the older villagers wore special beads over their chests, not for decoration, for listening. They believed the sound of the ball, the way it struck the walls, held messages, that a sharp echo meant the gods were pleased, a dull thud, displeasure, a delay, imbalance, a bad omen. So they sat, heads bowed, eyes closed, hearing more than anyone else. But the silence didn't mean the court was emotionless. When the game turned brutal, when a player fell hard, breath knocked out, or blood suddenly darkened the stone, there were moments, little twitches in the stillness. A grandmother's hand curling tighter around her charm, a young man pressing his knuckles to his mouth, a child leaning forward as if pulled by something older than curiosity. Some whispered prayers into the stone. Some wept quietly. Some did not breathe until the priest lowered his staff to end the match. And when the final moment came, when the chosen one was led to the altar or offered his own neck without being asked, the crowd did not look away. They watched, because looking away was dangerous. It meant disrespect. It meant shame. It meant forgetting your place in the ritual. And forgetting meant the gods might forget you. So they stared, eyes wide, unblinking. They didn't cry out when the blade rose. They didn't flinch when blood touched the stone. They didn't wail when the head was lifted to the sky. But after the priest turned and walked away, after the smoke began to rise, after the sun shifted just slightly in the sky, they left in silence. No one spoke on the walk home. Not that day, not that night. Some didn't speak for days. Because the memory of the match of the sacrifice had to be carried quietly, like an ember between ribs, a warmth and a warning. You look around now. The benches are empty. The dust has settled. But if you listen carefully, really carefully, you might still hear them breathing. Section 9. When the ball touched blood. The court is quiet now. You're standing at its center. The sun is just beginning to slip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the stones. You close your eyes and listen, not for sound, but for something softer. The way the air feels just before something begins, or ends. This is the part the elders never spoke of directly. The part everyone remembered, but no one described. What happened when the ball met blood. At first, it might seem accidental. A scraped knee, a collision too hard, a fall that left a smear of red across the pale stone. But the players knew the moment it happened, the shift in silence, the sharp intake of breath from the crowd, the taste in the air, copper, sudden, ancient. It changed the game. The Maya believed blood was not just a symbol of life, it was the fuel of it. It carried memory, power, lineage. When blood touched the court, the boundary between mortal and divine began to dissolve. Some priests claimed that the first drop was the god's signal that now they were watching closely, that now the court had become sacred, that now every movement mattered. Others believed something else, that the court itself fed on blood. Not with hunger, but with memory, that it absorbed the story of every game through every bruise, every cut, every offering, that when the ball rolled through a fresh streak of blood, it carried the spirit of the wounded player with it, as if the ball became an extension of the body, a vessel. You reach down and touch the stone beneath your feet. It's rough, cool, indifferent, but you swear there's a warmth there, faint, buried deep, like something once alive, like a memory too stubborn to fade. There are stories of balls stained crimson so dark they looked black by the end of the match. Some were burned afterward, not to erase the evidence, but to release the spirit trapped inside. Others were kept, wrapped in cloth, sealed in temples, whispered to during times of drought or disease. The priests would bring them out, roll them gently across the altar, and listen, not for sound, for answers. But the blood wasn't always accidental. There were moments in the match, brief, devastating, when a player would offer it on purpose. A cut across the chest, a slice down the arm, a pulled tooth tucked into the laces of the belt. It wasn't desperation, it was devotion, a way to plead with the gods, to say, "Notice me." Because sometimes being noticed was the only way to survive. The spectators could sense it too. When blood hit the court, their bodies tensed. Mothers clutched their necklaces. Children stopped swinging their legs. Even the birds in the trees seemed to go still. Because once the court had tasted blood, it demanded an ending. You look toward the stone hoop now. How many shots were made after that first drop? How many bounced too wide, too hard, too high? And how many found the ring cleanly, as if guided just after the first wound opened? They say the best matches were the ones that ended with the ball sailing through the hoop after blood had been spilled. A perfect arc, a sacred collision. And then, silence. Not victory, not relief. Just silence, because everyone knew what came next. You step backward, now careful not to trip over the uneven ground. The shadows are longer, the wind cooler. And for a moment, you swear you see something, a trail of red across the stone, impossibly fresh. A single drop, resting near the wall, as if it's been waiting. You blink. It's gone. But the image lingers, because blood never truly disappears here. Not in the cracks, not in the chance, not in the echo that follows the ball long after the game is over. Section 10. The sacred hoop. You look up. The stone ring looms high above the court wall, still silent. Impossible. The sky behind it is fading into that soft, uncertain blue of dusk. And yet the ring remains untouched by time, as if it was never meant to fall. You take a few steps back, then a few more. You try to imagine what it must have looked like, the ball rising against gravity, against pain, against every odd. To make it through that hoop wasn't just skill. It was something else, something divine. The Maya didn't build these rings for easy victory. They weren't placed low or wide. They were carved from single pieces of stone, smooth as bone, set meters above the ground, sometimes on both walls, sometimes just one, always too high. They weren't meant to be conquered often. That was the point. Scoring wasn't expected. It was miraculous. When the ball passed through, if it passed through, the court froze. Priests stepped forward. The drums stopped. Even the birds went quiet. The air would thicken with meaning. Because this wasn't just a goal. It was a message. That the gods were watching. That the sacrifice was worthy. That the players had performed something sacred. But not all miracles are gifts. You see, no one quite agrees on what happened after a goal. In some cities, it meant immediate victory. The team celebrated, lifted into song and ritual, and the chosen one, usually the captain, was taken to the temple. Not to be praised, to be prepared. They say his heart was removed while it still beat, offered in a jade bowl, wrapped in feathers, placed beneath the feet of a carved god who never blinked. In other places, the scoring player was spared, and the losing side was punished. The worst of them, sometimes the whole team led away silently, no ceremony needed, because failure was sacrifice enough. Then there are the stories, whispered only at night, that those who scored were neither killed nor freed, but transformed, taken into the jungle, fed strange herbs, painted head to toe in black, then buried alive beneath the court itself, not as punishment, but as guardians, spirits bound to the game forever. The ring, then, is more than a target. It is a gate between worlds. You watch it now, the way it frames the sky. You could almost believe that if you passed through it, your body would remain, but something inside would be lifted, burned away, offered up. Even the ring's carvings suggest this. Many are shaped like serpents, their mouths open in spiral knots. Some show stars, others skulls. There's one you can barely see a hand reaching toward the hoop from below, fingers outstretched, eternal. There's no net. There never was. Just open air. Just the long drop on the other side, where a missed shot might land at a priest's feet, or at the feet of the one waiting to be chosen. Imagine the sound. A solid rubber ball, thick with ritual, smacking the inside of the ring and falling through. Not a clang, not a bounce. A thud, a final note. You sit on the edge of the court, now knees drawn up, eyes fixed on the ring. A breeze moves through the trees, cool against your cheek. And for just a second, just one, you see it. A shadow arcing through the sky. A ball. It sails high, impossibly high. It curves, it spins, it passes cleanly through the hoop, silent as breath. Then disappears into the dark. You blink. There is nothing there, only the ring. Only the sky, only the echo of something too perfect to believe, and too terrible to forget. Section 11. The aftermath of victory. The ball has passed through the hoop. The court is quiet. Utterly, impossibly quiet. You feel it before you hear it. The shift. The way the air becomes heavier, as if every tree, every insect, every hidden god is holding its breath. The shot was perfect. Too perfect. And now the players stand frozen beneath the ring, their bodies slick with sweat and breathless from effort. One of them has won, but what that means isn't celebration. The priest steps forward. He moves slowly, as if the air resists him. In his hand is a long staff capped with obsidian and wrapped in cloth. He doesn't point it. He places it gently against the chest of the winning captain. No words, no nod. Just the touch, and that is enough. The player bows his head. The crowd doesn't cheer. They don't clap. They don't rise. Instead, they remain seated, eyes lowered, hands resting flat against their thighs. This is not a moment of noise. This is a moment of surrender. The captain removes his belt slowly, ceremonially, and lays it on the ground. His teammates step back. One of them is crying, but he turns his face away, not out of shame, out of awe, because to win is to be worthy. And to be worthy is to be taken. The priest leads him to the edge of the court. There other priests wait. They do not drag him. He walks beside them, barefoot now. A young girl steps forward from the crowd, holding a garland of red and yellow flowers. She places it around his neck, then disappears into the hush. The captain does not speak. He won't speak again. They lead him through the ceremonial gate, a low arch covered in glyphs that seem to shimmer in the dusk. Beyond it, there are steps, and at the top of those steps, the temple, the heart of it all. Some say he is brought inside, laid on a stone slab, warmed by incense smoke and chant. Some say he drinks something bitter before the end, a potion that opens the mind and silences the body. Others believe he enters the room awake, alert, and already halfway to the other world. They say the knife is jade, or flint, or obsidian, always sharp, always beautiful, because the gods notice these things. When the heart is offered, it must still beat. Because that is the sound the gods love most, not a drum, Not a song, but the final rhythm of a human soul choosing to rise. Down on the court, the players have not moved. The crowd begins to leave slowly. No words, just footsteps against dirt. Some wipe their eyes. Others press their foreheads to the stones before they go. A few stay behind, sitting quietly with their thoughts listening for signs. You walk the empty court after dark. You can still feel it, the weight of the choice. The paradox of the Maya game, that the greatest skill led not to fame, but to sacrifice. That perfection was not rewarded with praise, but with removal. The winner was not lost. He was elevated, lifted beyond this world, and the gods who watched in silence marked the moment with stars. That's what the old stories say, that when the match ends and the body is taken, a new light appears in the night sky. Maybe that's why you look up now, because something inside you hopes or fears that tonight the sky will change. And it does. One flicker, near the horizon, faint but there. You close your eyes, and somewhere, far away, a stone ring grows cold, a heart stops beating, and a god smiles. Section 12. The head as an offering. There is no funeral. There is no burial. The captain's body is carried away in silence. The blood is washed from the altar with water drawn from a sacred cenote, a sinkhole believed to touch the underworld. The chants are soft. The incense burns low, and when the body is gone, one part remains, the head. You see it now, not as something grim or grotesque, but as sacred. Carefully handled, cradled as if it still contained breath. It is placed in a stone basin, rubbed with oils of sapote and cacao, and wrapped in cloth stained with pigment. Because for the Maya, the head is not just the end. It is the beginning of something else. You walk slowly behind the procession as it leaves the temple, down the narrow stone path, past torches, flickering in the early night breeze toward the court again. The priests do not look at the crowd. They do not bow. They are deep in ritual now. At the edge of the court stands a tall wooden pole, and at its peak, a carved platform made of cedar and limestone. They climb carefully. The head is lifted with both hands and placed at the center of the platform, facing the sky. Not downward, not toward the court, but up, always up. Some believe this is how the soul escapes, through the eyes, through the mouth, through the breath that lingers even after the lungs are still. Others say the head itself becomes a speaker, able to deliver prayers directly to the gods. It will stay there for days, maybe weeks. The weather will not touch it because the gods will shield it. That's what the priests say. Sometimes it is painted. Bright reds, deep blues, glyphs inked along the jawline. Other times the skull is hollowed after a few days and turned into a rattle filled with jade beads sealed with wax and used in dances performed at the full moon. The sound it makes is not loud, but it cuts through silence like memory. And in some places, the skull becomes a ball. This isn't metaphor. They say a skilled artisan can take the skull of a warrior and wrap it in hardened rubber, layer by layer, until it bounces just enough to be used in a ceremonial match. Not every skull is suited for it. It must be unbroken, revered, given willingly. They call it the living ball. Matches played with such a ball are not about scoring. They are about communing. The players are not opponents. They are dancers, moving together to honor the spirit sealed within the ball, to remind the gods that sacrifice never ends. You sit beneath the pole, now looking up at the offering. The stars have begun to emerge. The fireflies blink just beyond the stone path. You hear the hum of insects, the crackle of the last torch, the low murmur of someone singing far away. And yet the loudest thing is the stillness. Not fear, not grief, reverence. Because here the line between body and soul is not straight. It loops, it spins, it passes through hoops carved in stone and rituals passed through breath. You think of the man who once stood where you stand now, the one whose head watches the stars, Did he know? Did he wonder if his skull would bounce again? Did he hope his final breath would become a prayer? And somewhere in the jungle, a priest begins another chant, soft, rhythmic, ancient. You do not know the words, but you understand the meaning. The offering has been made, and the gods are listening. Section 13. The twin myth that changed everything. Before the first court was ever carved, before the first ball ever bounced, before blood ever kissed stone, there was a story whispered from mouth to ear through centuries of breath, a story carved into codices and retold in the flicker of firelight long before the Spanish ever arrived, long before even Chichen Itza cast its shadows. It begins not with kings or cities, but with twins. Two brothers, born of a goddess, clever, fast, mischievous. They laughed too loudly and played too well, and they were loved by the people by each other, but not by the gods below. You know this story. Even if you've never heard it, it feels familiar. Two boys playing a game in the daylight, their ball thudding against stone laughter, ringing across the earth. But beneath them, something stirred. The lords of Xibalba, the underworld, did not like the sound of joy. So they sent for the twins. Come down, they said. Let us play. But they did not mean a game. They meant death. Xibalba was not a place of fire. It was a place of confusion, of trials, riddles that twisted like vines, darkness that swallowed memory. The twins were tested with scorpions, with blades with sleep, and each time they survived, not through strength, but through cleverness, through laughter, through each other. But in the end, one was killed. And for a moment, it seemed the game was over. But this is the Maya myth. Death is never the end. The dead twin returned transformed. Together they rose again, this time not as boys but as something more. They played a final match in the underworld, a ball game between the living and the dead. And they won, not by escaping death, but by beating it at its own game. They took the lords of Xibalba and ended them. And then, as a final act, they rose into the sky, one as the sun, one as the moon. That is why the Maya court exists, not for sport, not for blood, for memory, for balance. The game we've walked through, the courts, the rituals, the pain, it all echoes this myth. Each match is a retelling, each player a twin facing death, not to flee it, but to shape it, to turn suffering into meaning. Some say every match reactivates the story, that the court is the space between worlds, not here, not there, and the game is the bridge. When the ball rolls, it carries the weight of every twin who ever played, every spirit who ever returned. You sit in the grass now, watching the clouds drift across a sky filled with quiet stars. Two of them shine brighter than the rest, side by side, not touching, but always near. You remember the carvings from earlier, the ones on the side of the court, twin figures, arms outstretched, mirroring each other. One always smiling, the other always still. They are not just decoration. They are the first players. And when you think of the head on the altar, the blood on the court, the ball wrapped in silence, you begin to understand. This was never just about war, or punishment, or kings. It was always about the myth. Always about the choice to walk into the underworld willingly, with a grin, a ball, and a plan. You close your eyes. And somewhere, far below the earth, the twins smile back. Because you remembered. Because the game continues. Because the story lives on. Section 14. Blood for rain. Ball for balance. You wake in the middle of the night, not to sound, but to stillness. The jungle is hushed. No birds, no insects, no wind. As if the world is pausing for something sacred, something waiting. And in that silence, you remember what the priest once said. Without blood, the rain does not fall. Without the ball, the sky forgets to turn. The Maya didn't just believe in sacrifice for the sake of gods, they believed in sacrifice to keep the world from unraveling. A cosmic exchange, a balance that had to be maintained constantly, carefully, painfully. Everything in the universe had its mirror. The sun and the moon, the jaguar and the deer, the sky and the cenote, life and death. And in the center of it all, the ball court. It was not a building, it was a scale. One side held drought famine chaos, the other rain maze life. And the game? The game was the weight that kept it steady. You stand now in a court, long abandoned. Its stones cracked, its hoops collapsed. But the balance still feels present, like a string pulled tight through time. Somewhere you imagine there is still a priest watching the stars, still a player practicing his step, still a child asking, what happens if the game isn't played? Because that's the fear, isn't it? That the gods stop listening, that the rains stop coming, that the crops wither, and the rivers sink into silence. The match then becomes a kind of prayer, a moving offering, each bounce of the ball a syllable in a forgotten language. In some villages the court was only used when the rains failed. The elders would call for the players, dress them in bright feathers, dust their skin with ash and ochre. A priest would climb the highest platform and call to the clouds, not with hope, but with certainty. If you want rain, he would say, you must give something first. And so the game would begin. No audience, no celebration. Just players and stone and sky. If blood fell to the court, the rain would fall to the fields. Not immediately, but surely. And if the ball passed through the ring cleanly, they said the gods would dance. Thunder would roll in the distance. The leaves would twitch with excitement. The Maya believed the world was built on agreements, between humans and spirits, between kings and time, between players and gods. If one side failed to act, the other would disappear. So they never forgot. Even now, when the cities have fallen, when the temples are broken, when the language has faded from daily speech, the balance remains. You see it in the way water pools unevenly across the cracked court, in the way vines grow on one wall, but not the other, in the way your breath sounds louder on one side than the other. The game may be gone, but the world still waits for its rhythm. You kneel, placing your palm flat against the stone. It's warm. It doesn't move. But in that stillness you feel it. The echo, not of footsteps. Of a question. Is the balance still being kept? You don't answer. You just sit. Quiet, listening. And somewhere, far above the clouds, something shifts. Not a storm, not a god, just the memory of motion. The memory of a ball. Rising, falling, landing perfectly at the center of everything. Section 15. Women and the Game. You sit now at the edge of the court just outside its sacred boundary. The jungle breathes behind you. The air is thick with the scent of crushed leaves and wood smoke. The court is quiet but not forgotten. And as you rest there, a strange realization begins to take root. No women ever played the game. Not in the carvings, not in the records, not on the court. And yet, they were always there, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows that shaped it. You begin to see them now, not in stone or glyph, but in gesture, in rhythm, in preparation. The morning before a match, it was the women who rose first. While the players still slept, they stoked fires, ground maize, and whispered blessings into bowls of atoll. Every bite, every drink, every thread of the players' garments passed through the hands of mothers, wives, sisters. It wasn't just domestic work. It was ritual. Each act was layered with intention. When they wove the belt, they tied a feather into the inner lining from a bird caught at dawn for protection. When they painted the players' backs, they left a single unpainted line across the spine for breath. When they braided the hair of a captain, they hummed low and slow, following the rhythm of his heartbeat, steadying his soul. These weren't gestures of support. They were spells. The game might have been played by men, but it was conjured into being by women. And when blood was spilled, it was women who caught the echoes. Some sat at the edge of the court with folded cloths in their lap, not to clean, but to receive the energy of the match. Cloths, dyed in indigo or red, carried home, placed under sleeping mats, dreamed into. They were dream keepers. They were interpreters. When a game ended in death, the women didn't weep in public. They lit fires in silence. They placed offerings in quiet corners of their homes, a few cacao beans, a drop of honey, a bowl of salt. Each one meant something different. Protection, release, memory. In some villages, midwives were present at every match, not for injuries, but because a soul was about to leave the world, and they, the midwives, had always guided souls, in, out, across. And if the player was to be sacrificed, it was often the women who prepared the body. They bathed it, they sang to it, they placed maize in the mouth so the soul would not hunger in the next world. And when the skull was lifted to the altar, it was the women who stood just beyond the crowd, not looking, not speaking, but feeling everything. There's a carving, half erased by time, on a forgotten temple wall. It shows a woman kneeling beside a court holding a bowl. Inside the bowl, a single drop of something water-blood ink. No one knows, but beside her is a ball, and beside the ball, a small glyph balance. Because while men played the game, women held its meaning. They reminded the gods that sacrifice wasn't just spectacle, it was connection, that the body didn't move without the breath, that the court didn't echo without the hearth. You close your eyes now, and you feel her there, not a figure from history, but a presence, watching from the trees, holding a bundle of herbs, whispering a name you don't know, but somehow recognize. She doesn't step onto the court. She doesn't hold the ball. But without her, the game never begins. Section 16. Why Priests Watched Closely. You return to the court once more, just as the first light of morning spills over the stone. The world is soft with mist. Dew clings to every leaf, every vine, every carved edge. And as the light sharpens, you begin to notice the shadows. They are not random. They fall in patterns. One on the hoop, one across the steps, one where the center line cuts through the court. And high above, standing in silence beneath a canopy of woven cloth, are the priests. They do not chant, not yet. They do not hold blades, not now. They only watch. You might think they came for ritual, for blood, for performance, but they came for reading. To the Maya, everything was a sign. Every bounce of the ball, every slip of the foot, every twitch of a muscle, it all meant something. The game wasn't just sport, it was a language. And the priests were its readers. They stood in pairs, or threes clothed in jaguar pelts, with eyes blackened by ash. They carried no weapons, only tablets of bark paper and brushes tipped in soot. They dipped them into bowls of ink made from crushed berries, burned wood, and sometimes, or it was whispered, dried human blood. As the players moved, the priests recorded, not the score, but the shape of things. How the ball curved at a certain moment, whether it mimicked the path of Venus or traced the arc of a serpent's body. Whether a player stepped with his left foot first or stumbled at the center of the court, the place believed to be the navel of the world. It all mattered, because through the game, the gods spoke. Not with thunder, not with prophecy, but with physics, with motion, with repetition. The priests weren't there to judge. They were there to interpret, to see what others could not. They had memorized the calendar glyphs, the omens, the constellations. And when they watched the game, they weren't looking for winners. They were looking for alignment. Did the bounce fall in rhythm with the eclipse cycle? Did the players' steps echo the pattern of a coming storm? Did the shadow of the hoop fall across the heart of the court at just the right moment? If so, they would nod, quietly, maybe whisper to one another. And sometimes, rarely, one of them would step forward during the match, hand raised, not to stop the game, but to mark the moment. Here, this is where fate moved. This is where the gods reached down, not to bless or punish, but to signal. After the game, the priests gathered in the temple. They would speak then. Softly, slowly, sometimes for hours, sometimes not at all. They placed their written glyphs into small clay urns, sealed them with wax, and buried them beneath the court, not for record-keeping, for containment. Because some knowledge wasn't meant to linger too long above the ground. There are stories, not many, just whispers of matches that ended too perfectly, where every movement aligned, every shadow matched the prophecy. And the priests, instead of celebrating, ordered the court to be closed, covered with earth, never used again. Because perfection is dangerous, and the gods do not repeat themselves. You walk the upper rim now where the priests once stood. The view is wide. The court below looks smaller. You can see every crack in the stone, every worn path, every place where blood might have once darkened the floor. You close your eyes. Try to imagine what they saw. Not just the game, but the meaning beneath it, the way the universe pulsed through hips and elbows, the way breath and fate collided in the air with the ball. You wonder if they still stand here, not in body, but in vision. Watching, recording, waiting, and somewhere below the game begins again. Section 17. The sculptures that remember. The court is quiet now. Empty, overgrown. The vines curl like fingers over the edges, creeping slowly toward the center. But the walls, oh, the walls still speak. You run your hand along one, not to clean it, just to feel. The stone is rough in places, smooth in others. The carved lines are shallow, but precise like veins. Each groove worn from centuries of wind and rain, yet somehow still sharp enough to hold stories. Not in words, in forms. You see them, everywhere. A man crouched mid-stride, hips twisted just so. A ball suspended in air just before it strikes. A jaguar mask, fierce and frozen. A pair of eyes that don't blink, that haven't blinked in 1,000 years. These aren't decorations. They're memories. Because the Maya didn't just watch the game. They recorded it. Not to praise, not to relive, but to anchor it, to keep it from slipping away into the jungle or the stars. Each sculpture is a moment, not a summary. Not a scene, a moment. And each moment is heavy. There's a panel on the southern wall, barely visible unless the light hits it, right of a player mid-fall. His hands not bracing, his face not afraid. He knew. The way his knee touches the earth, the tilt of his head, the slack in his fingers. He had already surrendered. Another carved deeper shows a priest, but not in prayer, in judgment. One hand raised, one eye closed. Not looking at the player, but at the sky, interpreting. You sit before it, now knees drawn in, head tilted back. You imagine being the sculptor, the one chosen to chisel the game into permanence. He wouldn't have worked quickly. Each line would be made with thought, with weight, not just to get it right, but to feel it right. Stone holds memory longer than skin, longer than paper, longer than names. And so they used it, not to glorify, to warn. You find another panel, smaller, tucked behind a half-collapsed column. This one shows two figures, twins again, one leaping, one kneeling. Between them, a ball. Inside the ball, a skull. No words accompany it, but none are needed. You reach out, fingertips, brushing the image. It's colder here, or maybe it's just your skin that's warmer. Either way, the sensation lingers. Some say the sculptures are alive, that on certain nights when the moon is thin and the crickets fall silent, the figures shift, just slightly. The eyes look in new directions. The ball moves an inch. The priest's hand tilts a fraction toward the stars. Not ghosts, just memory replaying. Because the court never forgets, You walk slowly along the wall, now tracing each story. A match played in the rain. A player with arms outstretched, inviting death. A hoop with smoke rising from its center. A jaguar standing beside a kneeling man watching, judging, waiting. They carved what they feared. They carved what they couldn't control. They carved what they hoped the gods would see. And they left it here, for you. You crouch before the final sculpture, half covered in moss. The face is worn, the eyes are gone, but the shape remains. You wipe a bit of dirt away and find a single glyph beneath the chin. You don't read it. You just listen. And for a heartbeat, you swear you hear breathing. Not yours, not the jungle's, something deeper. The stone remembers. It always has. Section 18. When the game ended for good, the stones are still here. The hoops, though worn, still cling to the walls. The carvings still whisper if you're quiet enough. But the game has stopped. You walk the empty court slowly, each footstep stirring a little dust, each breath echoing faintly between the stone walls. It's hard to imagine this place full of voices, full of life. Now there are only vines, wind, and birds who've forgotten what silence meant before humans came. There was no final match, no grand farewell. Just fading. The end came not in a moment, but in a slow unraveling, like threads coming loose from cloth that no one mended in time. As the centuries passed, rulers fell. Priests lost power. The old gods grew quiet, and the temples no longer echoed with their names. When the Spanish arrived, they didn't understand what they were seeing. To them, the ball game was barbaric. The blood, the sacrifice, the ritual, all of it, was seen through their own hunger for conquest and control. They banned it, demolished courts, burned codices, tried to erase the rhythms that had held the Maya world together. But they were too late. By then, many of the courts were already abandoned, not because the people no longer believed, but because the systems around them had collapsed. Droughts came, crops failed, cities were left to the jungle, and the gods, it seemed, had stopped listening. There are stories whispered through villages of the last matches, not public games, quiet ones, played by a handful of old men under moonlight. No ceremony, no priests, just memory. They played not to win, not to die, but to remember how the ball felt, to hear it bounce one last time across sacred stone. They say in one village, the very last ball was buried beneath the court wrapped in maize leaves and tied with a red cord. Not as an offering, as a goodbye. You reach the far end of the court and rest against the cool stone. You imagine what it must have felt like to be a boy, born just a generation too late. The courts overgrown, the stories half forgotten, the elders speaking in hushed tones. There used to be games, they'd say, with fire and blood and gods in the sky. And the boy would listen eyes wide, not sure if it was a myth or something he had missed only by a few breaths of time. Even today the echoes remain. Not in ceremonies, not in sacrifice, but in rhythm. In the way farmers step through their fields' knees, bending in the same cadence players once used on stone. In the way songs still rise during storms, their verses shaped like chants that once followed goals. In the way children toss stones into circles, drawn in dirt, pretending they are something more. Somewhere in the world, someone still dreams of a court, still dreams of a ball made of memory, still dreams of a ring too high to reach. And sometimes, just sometimes in the depth of night, when the air is thick with sleep and the mind drifts, you can almost hear it, the call of a crowd, not cheering, but breathing in unison, the sound of bare feet on stone, the thud of a sacred ball rebounding once, twice, and then gone. Because the game didn't truly end. It just moved. From the court to memory. And there it waits. Section 19. The ball courts today. You step out of the forest and into the clearing. And there it is. The court, still standing, still breathing. Not in the way it once did, not with firelight and feathers and the scent of blood, but in quiet defiance. The trees have bent around it. The moss clings gently not to erase, but to remember. The jungle has not swallowed it whole. Not yet. You walk forward slowly, your shoes crunching on gravel, then stone. A toucan calls once in the canopy above, then falls silent. It's early, just after sunrise. You're the only one here, or at least the only one with breath in your lungs. The walls are lower than you imagined. The hoop is higher, and yet it feels familiar. You've seen pictures before, in books, on signs, maybe in a documentary long ago, narrated in a voice too calm to match the history it was describing. But seeing it in person, standing at the center, turning slowly, feeling the gravity of it, is different. It feels like a cathedral, but older, more alive. The carvings are worn, eroded. Some have vanished entirely. Others remain a hand, a face, a jaguar's tail, curling into stone. You crouch to trace one with your finger, not to decode it, just to acknowledge it. You wonder how many feet have stood where yours now rest. How many players, how many priests, how many witnesses, how many ghosts? A tour group will arrive soon. You know this. The sign near the entrance said as much. A guide will stand beneath the hoop and explain how the ball was made of rubber, how the game had religious significance, how someone may or may not have died. The group will nod politely. Someone will take a picture. Someone else will whisper cool. And they'll move on. But you don't move. You sit at the edge of the court, legs stretched out, palms pressed to the cool floor. You close your eyes and listen. Not for sound, for feeling. The court hums faint and low, or maybe that's just your heart matching the rhythm of something older. You feel the stillness between your ribs. You imagine the ball rolling past you, not fast, just steady, as if guided by memory. The breeze stirs the leaves. A gecko skitters across the far wall. A single drop of dew falls from a vine, hits the stone, and disappears. And then, just for a moment, you swear you hear it. A footstep, a breath, a distant echoing thud. Not loud, not clear, but real. You open your eyes. The court is empty. Of course it is. But something remains, not on the walls, not in the carvings, in the space between. The space where a game was once played, not for glory but for balance, for life, for rain, for memory. You rise, brush the dirt from your palms, and take one last look at the hoop. It hasn't changed. It doesn't need to. It is a question. It is a gate. It is a circle that doesn't close because the story is still being told. Somewhere out there, a child draws a ring in the dirt, tosses a ball, misses, laughs, tries again. The game is not gone. It's just quieter now. Like a dream, just before waking. Section 20. You were there, weren't you? You lie back now. The stone cool beneath your spine. The sky slowly deepening overhead. The court stretches around you like a forgotten sentence, unfinished but eternal. You close your eyes, just for a moment. And suddenly, you're not watching anymore. You're inside it. The crowd isn't behind a screen or a tour guide's story. It's all around you, breathing in time with the drums. The scent of copal smoke curls past your nose. Your skin is warm with sun and something else, anticipation. Your hands tremble slightly as you adjust your belt. You look down and see dust clinging to your legs. Your fingers stained with red pigment. The glyph painted across your chest is fresh. Someone, a woman, maybe someone you don't quite remember, brushed it on with a whisper this morning, for strength, for protection, or maybe for goodbye. The court feels smaller now. Not grand, not ancient, personal. The ball thuds once against the wall. Your eyes follow it. You step forward. You don't know how long the match has been going. It feels like hours. It feels like forever. The ball moves like it knows where it wants to go. You don't chase it. You respond to it. You're not playing. You're remembering. Your elbow strikes it just right. It soars not high, but far. The other player stumbles. And then the world tilts, because now it's coming back to you. Not the ball, the memory. You've played before. You've stood here a dozen lifetimes ago, or just once in a dream. You've seen the hoop. You've felt the stone. You've heard the silence of a crowd that doesn't cheer, only waits. You remember the moment your breath caught in your throat as the priest placed his hand on your shoulder, not in warning, in recognition, because you were the one. Not the best, not the worst, just the chosen. You blink and you're lying on your back again. The court is quiet. The jungle rustles softly. The stars have come out in full, too many to count, but somehow not enough. Your chest rises slowly with each breath, and you begin to wonder, were you the player? Were you the priest? Were you the one who carved the story into stone? Or were you just someone watching, always watching from the edge? It doesn't matter. Because the game welcomed you anyway. It whispered your name when no one else heard. It followed you through dreams, through stories, through centuries of forgetting. And now here you are, not just remembering, returning. Because the court is not a place, it's a rhythm. A breath, a sacrifice, a circle. And tonight, it closes with you inside it. Let your eyes stay closed. Let the silence hold you. You were there. You've always been there. And the game never ended. It just waited. For you. Shh. It's okay now. You've made it to the end. You walked the court. You touched the stone. You heard the drums, even if only in your mind. And now it's time to rest. You don't need to remember every name, every carving, every chant whispered under moonlight. You don't need to carry the stories in your arms. They're already inside you. The player, the priest, the twin, the witness. They're all quiet now. The ball has stopped rolling. The torches have gone out. The gods are full. There's no need to stay awake. Let the vines curl gently around the edges of memory. Let the jungle grow soft again. Let the stone court fade into fog. You've given your attention. You've paid with presence, and that's enough. Somewhere far away the hoop still hangs. Somewhere the stars are still watching. But not tonight. Tonight, they're watching over you. So breathe out. Loosen your jaw. Let your eyes grow heavy. You've played your part. The story is at peace. And now, sleep. The court will still be here in dreams. Good night.